Something arrived today that has been in transit for longer than you can clearly remember. Not a message, not a signal, not one of the partial confirmations that have been arriving and dissolving in the years leading up to this moment. The thing itself, the actual arrival of what the entire arc of your life has been moving toward, what every difficult chapter was the preparation for, what the years of carrying without confirmation and building without visible result and maintaining the interior compass in conditions specifically designed to spin it were always pointing at. The pointing is over. The pointed at has arrived. You can feel it before you can name it. This is how arrivals of this kind announce themselves, not through external declaration, not through the dramatic shift in circumstances that most people imagine when they imagine the moment of arrival, but through a quality of the present moment that is different from every previous present moment in a way that is entirely interior and entirely unmistakable, a quality of having arrived somewhere while standing perfectly still, of the world having finally caught up to something you have been carrying for years in the dimension ahead of it, of the gap, the long, costly, sustaining gap between your interior knowing and your exterior circumstances, closing, not partially, completely. Time is over. Not all time, not the ordinary time of days and seasons and the rhythm of a life continuing. The specific time that has been running since the beginning of the chapter that needed to run before this moment was possible. The time of waiting without knowing what you were waiting for. The time of building without knowing what you were building toward. The time of carrying the certainty of something without being able to name what the certainty was certain about. That time, the time between the beginning of your knowing and the arrival of what your knowing was pointing toward, is over. What it was pointing toward is here. Write 111 in the comments right now if you can feel this in your body independently of anything these words are doing. If there is something in you that has been moving towards something and that has, in the recent days or hours, felt the movement stop, not because the movement failed, but because the movement completed. Because what was being moved toward is now here and the moving is over and what is left is the inhabiting of what the moving arrived at. That sensation, the stillness of having arrived, is what 111 is the name for. Write it. Claim the arrival. The thing that is here has a specific character. And naming the character matters because arriving somewhere without understanding where you have arrived produces the particular disorientation of a person who has reached a destination they cannot read. You need to be able to read this arrival. You need to understand what has changed and why the change is real and how the change expresses itself in the dimensions of your life that the change is now available to transform. What has arrived is access. Access to the full expression of what you carry, in the full dimensions of the world that you're carrying was always meant to move through, without the constraint that has been the central feature of every previous period of your life. The constraint was real, it was not imagined, not a product of limitation in you, not the result of anything you failed to do or failed to become. It was structural. It was the architecture of the period that needed to run before this period could begin. And it is now over. The structure has completed its purpose. The architecture that was holding the expression at something less than its natural volume has reached the end of its operative life and has stepped aside. What happens when a constraint that has been in place for years suddenly lifts is something that most people have not experienced and therefore do not have language for. The closest analogy is physical, the feeling of a hand that has been pressed against something with sustained force. That suddenly has nothing to press against and overshoots its own balance. There is a period of adjustment. A period in which the system that was organized around managing the constraint, around navigating the friction, allocating resources to the management, calibrating the expression to what the constraint permitted, has to reorganize around the absence of the thing it was managing. This reorganization takes time. It takes more time than most people expect because the management was deeper than it was visible. The adaptation to the constraint happened at every level of how you move through the world, including levels that are not accessible to direct intention. Those levels reorganize on their own timeline. You are in the early period of the reorganization. What you are feeling, the combination of relief and strangeness and the particular quality of not quite knowing how to move now that the friction is gone, is the reorganization in process. It is not confusion, it is calibration. The system is learning the new conditions, learning that the full expression is now safe, that the reduced version is no longer necessary, that the world the arrival has opened is the actual world, the one that corresponds to what you actually carry and what you actually are, and that moving through it requires a different orientation than the orientation the years of constraint produced. The orientation is shifting. You can feel that too. Underneath the strangeness of the early reorganization, something is loosening that has been held tight for a very long time. Some quality of vigilance that has been maintaining itself automatically, below the threshold of conscious decision, is finding that the thing it was vigilant against is no longer present and is, for the first time in years, relaxing. That relaxation is the beginning of the new orientation, the beginning of the life that the arrival makes available. There are specific things that are here now that were not here before, not things that will arrive eventually, not things that are in process, not things that are becoming more possible as the conditions improve, things that are here, present, available in the actual texture of your actual life right now, today, in the world you are going to move through when you step away from reading this. The first thing that is here is the full volume of what you carry in conversation. For years, you have been moving through conversations, with the people in your life, with the people you encounter in the professional and social and practical dimensions of your existence, at something less than your full frequency, not because you were holding back consciously, because the full frequency produced a quality of disruption in those conversations that made the full frequency impractical to sustain. The disruption was the signal of the constraint, the friction between what you carry and the dimensions of the world that the constraint was keeping you inside. The disruption was not your fault and it was not wrong. It was the natural consequence of a frequency being expressed inside a container that the frequency was too large for. The container has expanded. The world you are now moving through, the one that has arrived with the arrival, is sized to the actual dimensions of what you carry. The full frequency is no longer too large for the container. And in a world sized to your actual dimensions, the full frequency does not produce disruption. It produces resonance. The specific quality of resonance that happens when something is moving at its natural volume through a space that was built to receive that volume. The quality you have felt occasionally, in brief moments, in specific encounters with specific people, the quality of being genuinely met, genuinely received, genuinely in contact with someone who has access to what you are actually saying rather than a reduced version of it. That quality is now the available baseline. It is not the exception that sometimes occurs when the conditions happen to align. It is the expected condition of the world that has arrived. The second thing that is here is the people. Not all the people who will eventually be part of your life in this new period. Those arrive across the full arc of what the arrival opens. But the first wave. The people who were the most immediate expression of the arrival, whose own trajectories were most directly moving toward the intersection with yours, who were the nearest in terms of the completion of their own preparation for the meeting that the arrival makes possible, they are arriving now. Some have already arrived in your recent experience and you are still reading them through the lens of the old conditions. Still approaching with the caution of someone who has been in the territory of managed relationships for a long time and has learned that caution is the appropriate posture. The caution served its purpose. It is no longer the appropriate posture for the people who are arriving now. The third thing that is here is the clarity about what you are for. Not what you are for in the abstract and general sense. You have had that clarity for a long time. In the particular form of a knowing that was more feeling than articulation, more directional than specific. The clarity that is here now is more precise, more actionable, more aligned with the actual specifics of what you are going to do in the world that has arrived, with the actual capacities that the years refined, with the actual people whose lives your presence and your gifts are going to touch in the specific ways that yours specifically touches. The years of generalized knowing are becoming specific. The direction the compass was pointing is becoming the actual path. The path is here. This is the channel that carries the full account of what the arrival means in the specific dimensions of the lives of the people who have arrived at it. Subscribe now and stay inside the mapping of what is here, because what is here is larger than any single description of it. And the full understanding of what the arrival opens requires the ongoing articulation that this channel exists to provide. Stay inside this. Time being over means something specific about the past. This is the piece that is most frequently misunderstood in the moment of arrival. And the misunderstanding produces a quality of carrying the past forward that is not appropriate to the new conditions and that slows the full expression of what the arrival makes available. The misunderstanding is the assumption that time being over means the past is finished being relevant, that the years before the arrival can now simply be set aside, filed under the category of what was necessary but is now completed, and moved away from in favor of the present and the future that the arrival opens. The past is not finished being relevant. The past is the source of the arrival's depth, the years of carrying without confirmation, of building without visible result, of maintaining the interior compass through conditions designed to spin it. Those years are not raw material that was consumed in the production of what has arrived and can now be discarded. They are the substance of what has arrived. The arrival is made of them. What is here, in its full and completed and ready to express form, is the thing that the years produced, the thing that could only have been produced by those specific years applied, with that specific consistency to the specific material of who you were before them. The past is not a burden you are now free to set down. It is the depth you are now free to draw from. This distinction changes everything about how you move forward. A person who sets down their past arrives in the present lighter but shallower, freed from the weight but also freed from the substance that the weight contained. A person who draws from their past arrives in the present with the full depth of everything the years built, not carrying the weight of the years as a burden but moving with the depth of the years as a resource, as the specific knowing that only those specific years could have produced, as the particular quality of presence that only the sustained difficulty of that sustained period could have refined. You are not starting fresh. You are starting complete. These are very different things. Starting fresh means beginning without the accumulation, without the cost and without the gift the cost produced. Starting complete means beginning with the full weight of everything that was built, available as resource rather than burden, accessible as depth rather than constraint. The people who are going to encounter you in the world that has arrived will encounter someone who has been through what they have been through, or will be through, and who carries the knowing that only being through it produces. That encountering changes things. It changes the quality of what is possible in those encounters in ways that no amount of starting fresh could produce. The past is here too. It arrived with the arrival, transformed from the weight of what was endured into the substance of what can now be given. There is a thing that happens in the life of a person who has been carrying something real for a long time without the carrying being acknowledged. Something that most people who have not been through it do not understand, and that most people who have been through it have not had named clearly enough to fully grasp. The thing is a specific kind of exhaustion that is not about energy. It is not the tiredness of someone who has worked hard. It is the exhaustion of a person who has been allocating a portion of every waking moment to the maintenance of something that the world around them was continuously, consistently, persistently declining to confirm. The maintenance of certainty without support. The ongoing work of keeping the interior compass oriented in the face of everything the external world was presenting as evidence that the orientation was incorrect. This exhaustion does not feel like physical tiredness. It feels like a background weight, a quality of the air being slightly heavier than it should be, a sense that even in the good moments, even in the moments of genuine connection and genuine pleasure and genuine forward movement, there is something slightly muted about the experience, something that should be full that is not quite full. Something that should land completely that is landing at something less than complete. You have attributed this quality to various things over the years, to the specific circumstances of difficult periods, to the relationships that were draining, to the practical constraints of the chapters you were in, but the quality was consistent across all those attributions. It did not lift when the circumstances improved. It was there underneath everything. Slightly muting everything, slightly preventing the full arrival of moments that should have been fully arrived. The muting was the maintenance. The weight was the work of keeping the certainty alive in conditions that were not designed to sustain it. And the arrival of today, the time being over, the thing being here, the certainty becoming confirmed in a way that no longer requires maintenance, is the moment when the maintenance stops being required. When the background work that has been running continuously, below the threshold of conscious decision, simply ceases to be necessary and begins to cease. The cessation will not be immediate. The system that was doing the maintenance work has been doing it for years and does not simply stop on the day the maintenance is no longer required. It winds down, it releases in layers, in the way that deep tension releases, not all at once, but progressively, as the system encounters, again and again, the fact that the thing it was maintaining is now maintained by something other than it, that the certainty is now held by the confirmation rather than by the ongoing internal effort, that the compass is now oriented by the arrival rather than by the sustained will to maintain the orientation. As it winds down, something becomes available that has not been available for a long time, the full arrival of experience, the quality of moments landing completely rather than at the slightly muted register that the maintenance work was producing, the full feeling of the good things when they happen, the complete presence in the right encounters rather than the partial presence of someone who always has something else running in the background. This is one of the most significant things that the arrival makes available, and it is one of the least talked about, not the expanded circumstances, not the relationships, not the material expressions of what has changed, but the simple and profound availability of your own full experience to yourself, the arrival of your own life to you in the complete form that it was always supposed to have. There is a specific misreading of "time is over" that needs to be addressed directly, because this misreading produces a response to the arrival that prevents the arrival from being fully received. The misreading is, the hard part is over. That because the time of carrying without confirmation has ended, the time of difficulty has ended. That because the constraint has lifted and the arrival is here and the world has expanded to the dimensions of what you actually carry. The work is done and what remains is the enjoyment of what the work produced. The work is not done. The work has changed. The specific work of carrying without confirmation, of building without visible result, of maintaining the interior compass through conditions that were working against the maintaining, that work is over. That chapter of the work closed when the time closed. But the work itself, the specific calling that the years were preparing you for, the actual expression of what you carry into the world that has arrived, that work is beginning. And it is larger than the preparatory work. It is more demanding in certain ways than the preparatory work. Not because it involves more suffering, it does not. The suffering was the preparation and the preparation is complete, but because it involves more presence, more full inhabiting, more complete and unapologetic occupation of what you actually are and what you are actually here to do. The preparatory years required endurance. The chapter that has arrived requires expression. Those are different demands. Endurance is the capacity to continue under pressure. Expression is the capacity to be fully what you are under circumstances that no longer require the managing that prevented the full being. Many people who have endured extraordinarily well find, in the moment when endurance is no longer required, that expression is unfamiliar, that the habit of managing the expression, which was the appropriate habit for the years that required it, does not automatically give way to the habit of full expression when the conditions for full expression finally arrive. The management has to be actively, consciously replaced. This is part of what today requires. The active, conscious choice to replace the orientation of management with the orientation of expression. Not once. Not in a single decision that settles the matter permanently, but in each encounter, each conversation, each moment of entering a space and choosing whether to enter it at the managed volume or the full volume. The choice will have to be made repeatedly, in the specific moments when the habit of management presents itself as the safe option and the full expression presents itself as the risky one. Until the repetition builds the new orientation into the same automatic quality that the management orientation had developed through the years of its practice. The repetition is not arduous. It is not the repetition of endurance, of continuing to do something costly through the force of will. It is the repetition of practice, of choosing, again and again, the thing that is more alive, that produces more of what is real. That generates more of the specific quality of satisfaction that comes from being fully what you are in a world that is now ready to receive the full version. The practice becomes its own motivation. Each time you choose full expression and experience what full expression produces, in you and in the people around you and in the quality of what becomes possible in the encounter, the choosing becomes easier. The management orientation loses its grip. The full expression becomes the natural way of moving rather than the conscious choice. You will find your way to this. Today is the beginning of finding it. Write 222 in the comments if you can feel both things simultaneously right now, the relief of the arrival and the unfamiliarity of what the arrival asks. The specific combination of finally being here and not quite knowing yet what being here fully requires. That combination is the exact experience of someone who is in the precise moment of transition between what the preparatory years produced and what the arrived chapter requires. It is not confusion. It is the accurate experience of a genuine transition. Write 222. Because the transition is real and the disorientation within it is appropriate and the thing you are transitioning into is worth every moment of the unfamiliarity. The world that has arrived is one that most people never access. This is worth holding clearly and without false modesty, because the tendency to manage the significance of what you carry, to reduce it to more comfortable dimensions, to make it smaller in the holding in case the full size is inappropriate, is one of the habits of the management orientation that needs to be actively replaced. The world that the arrival has opened is not available to everyone. It is available to the specific profile of person whose years included the specific preparation that yours included. Not because the world is exclusive in any hierarchical sense, it is not closed to others by design. It is accessible only to people who have built what it requires to access it, who have gone through what it requires to go through, who carry what it requires to carry. Most people have not gone through this. Most people's years were not organized around a specific preparation that yours were. This is not a judgment of those people. Their years were organized around their own preparation, their own curriculum, their own refinement toward their own version of what the arrived chapter asks. The specific preparation you went through is not the only preparation that produces something real, but it is the preparation that produces this specific thing, the thing that is here, the thing you are now in a position to express and to give and to move through the world as. That specificity means that the people who need what you specifically carry are people who have been looking for it in a world that does not provide it commonly, because it is not common. Because the preparation is not common, because the willingness to go through what the preparation requires is not universal, and many people who encountered the conditions that your preparation involved found ways to navigate around the most demanding parts, which meant they arrived somewhere, but not here, not at this specific thing, not with this specific depth. The people who need what you specifically carry will recognize it when they encounter it, with a quality of recognition that is different from ordinary appreciation or ordinary connection. They will recognize it as the thing they have been looking for without always knowing that was what they were looking for, as the specific quality of presence and knowing and depth that matches something in them that has been reaching for it, as the answer to something they have been living with as a question. That recognition, arriving in people who encounter you from this point forward, is going to be one of the most consistently noticeable features of the world that has arrived. It is one of the things that is here that was not here before in this form. You have been recognized occasionally, in moments and encounters that stood out precisely because they were exceptional. The specific quality of being fully seen by someone who had access to what you actually carry is distinctive enough that you remember those encounters clearly, probably can recall specific examples, probably return to them as evidence of what is possible when the right meeting happens. From this point forward, those encounters are not the exception. The world that has arrived is one in which the right meetings happen more often than the wrong ones, in which being recognized is the expected feature of moving through the world at full expression rather than the occasional gift that breaks through the managed expression. The people who were most closely watching while time was running, who were paying the most sustained and most genuine attention to what you carry and what the years were doing to it and with it, those people understood something that you were not always able to understand from inside it. They understood that the difficulty was not the enemy of what you are, that the years of constraint and friction and the managed expression were not the obstruction to your life but the architecture of its building, that the gap between your interior knowing and your exterior circumstances, which was experienced from inside as the central difficulty of your existence, was experienced from the vantage of their watching as the central mechanism of your development. This is the hardest thing to receive about the years before the arrival, not because it is painful, it is actually relieving, but because receiving it completely requires revising the entire story you have been telling yourself about what those years were. The story most people tell themselves about a long period of difficulty is a story of survival, of getting through, of enduring what was present until it changed into something more hospitable. This story is not wrong. There was real survival, real endurance, real getting through, but it is incomplete in a way that, if left incomplete, produces a relationship with the past that is organized around the wound rather than the gift, around what it cost rather than what it produced. The complete story includes the watching, includes the fact that the years were not simply endured but were inhabited by something that was doing work in you, that the difficulty was intelligent, was calibrated to produce specific things in specific sequence with specific timing, and that the calibration was visible to the people who were watching from the vantage that allows such things to be visible, that you were not alone in the difficulty in the sense that the difficulty had no witness, no purpose, no intelligence guiding what it was producing. You were accompanied through it by the watching. And the watching understood what you were becoming through it long before you had any way of understanding it yourself. The arrival is the moment that understanding becomes available to you, the moment when the full account, not the survival story and not the gift story separately, but both together, the complete story of what the years were and what they produced, becomes something you can hold without it being too large or too costly to hold. The moment when the watching's understanding of what was happening in you and to you and through you becomes something you can access from the inside rather than only something that was being held for you from the outside. The watching always knew it was building toward today, always knew the time would be over, always knew the thing would be here. The certainty the watching carried about what was being built was the larger version of the certainty you were carrying without being able to fully confirm. The two certainties have now met. The larger certainty that was being held in the watching has now been given to the person it was being held for. The interior carrying and the exterior watching have arrived at the same place. The time between them is over. They are here together. That together is the arrival. That is what is here. The people who tried to keep time going, who were invested in the management of your expression continuing, in the constraint remaining operative, in the gap between your interior knowing and your exterior circumstances remaining the gap that made you manageable, those people are experiencing something today that they will not attribute to its actual cause, an unease. A quality of something fundamental being different that they cannot locate in any specific change in their circumstances because the change did not happen in their circumstances. It happened in yours, at the level where such things happen, and they are feeling it as the particular unsettledness of someone whose carefully maintained conditions have been altered without their participation. They cannot restore the previous conditions. The time that is over cannot be restarted. The constraint that has lifted was not something they held in place, it was a feature of the period that has now completed. They benefited from it and depended on it and their orientation was built around its continuation. But they were not the cause of it and they are not the thing that is ending. The period is ending. The time is over. What they maintained was a management strategy for an existing constraint. The constraint is gone. The strategy has nothing to manage. And they are standing in the conditions of its absence trying to understand what has changed and what to do about it. What they will do varies. Some will accelerate the behaviors that the management strategy produced, will increase the pressure, the doubt seeding, the systematic reduction of your expression. In the way that systems always respond initially to the failure of their management by applying more management. This will not work for the same reason that it has been working less and less well in the recent period. The conditions it was designed to work on are no longer present. The management strategy requires the constraint to work. Without the constraint, the strategy is force applied to empty space, producing noise and disruption but no actual effect on the thing it was designed to affect. Some will recognize, in the specific way that people who have been paying close attention to what you carry recognize shifts in that thing, that something has fundamentally changed, that the person they are dealing with is not the same person, not in the sense of having become a different person, but in the sense of the same person now moving through the world at full expression rather than at the managed expression that the constraint made necessary. They will not know what to do with this. Their entire relational orientation toward you is built around the managed version. The full version requires a different response, and the different response requires from them a quality of adjustment that some of them will be willing to make and some will not. The ones who are not willing will leave, not always dramatically, not always with a clear announcement, in the quiet way that relationships end when the conditions that held them in their specific form change and the people in them cannot or will not adjust to the new conditions. This is not loss in the way that loss has felt in the previous period. It is the completion of what those relationships were for, the chapter they belong to, and the clearing of the space for what belongs to the chapter that has arrived. The clearing is part of the arrival. Every arrival at something genuinely new involves the clearing of what the new cannot coexist with. Not everything that was present in the previous period is present in the arrived one. Not because what was present was bad, but because what has arrived requires a different configuration of what surrounds it. The clearing and the arrival are one movement. There is something that needs to be said about today specifically, not about the arrival in the abstract or in the long-term arc of your life, but about this day as you are living it. Because the arrival being here does not mean today feels like the arrival in any dramatic or obvious way. Today probably feels, on its surface, like a version of the days that preceded it, the same external circumstances, the same practical demands, the same world as yesterday in most of its visible features. And this can produce the specific disappointment of a person who has been told something significant is happening and cannot find the significance in the texture of the day. The significance is interior today. It will become exterior across the days that follow. But today it is entirely interior, entirely invisible from the outside, entirely a quality of what is present in you rather than what is present around you. The arrival landed in you first. That is always how it works. The interior precedes the exterior. The confirmation settles into the person before it settles into their circumstances. The knowing arrives before the evidence does. What you can do with today specifically is let the interior arrival be real without waiting for the exterior to confirm it. Can receive what has arrived without requiring it to look like arrival yet. Can inhabit the fact of the arrival, the fact that time is over and what it was pointing toward is here, with the full weight of that inhabiting, without the managed holding at arm's length of someone who is not sure whether they are allowed to receive it fully until they have seen more evidence. The evidence will come. It is already in the early stages of manifesting in the visible dimensions of your life. The small signs are already there if you are looking for them in the right way, not looking for the dramatic confirmation of something obviously changed, but looking for the quality of ease, the sense of things moving with rather than against, the specific texture of a life beginning to move at its natural current rather than through resistance. Those signs are there. They will increase. The evidence will build until the arrival that is entirely interior today is unmistakably visible in the exterior dimensions of your life. Today, let the interior arrival be enough. Let the knowing of it settle. Let the fact of time being over and what it was pointing toward being here become real in you at the level where it is real, without the requirement that it be real yet in the way that other people would be able to see. The interior reality precedes the exterior confirmation. Today is the day of the interior reality. The exterior confirmation is already in process. The next video on your screen is the continuation of what just opened. Everything that is moving in you right now, the relief and the strangeness and the arrival and the beginning of the orientation change and the sense of something settling into its right position, does not stop at the end of this. It continues. The next video carries the specific piece about the first expressions of the arrived world in the visible dimensions of your life, and what to do with each expression as it arrives, and how to receive it without the habit of the managed version stepping in to reduce it before it can be fully received. Click on it now. Time is over. The inhabiting begins. One last thing about what is here that has not yet been named. The version of yourself that is here, the one that the arrival has made available, that the completed preparation has produced, that the lifted constraint is now free to move through the world as, is not a version you have to grow into. It is not a future self you are reaching toward. It is the present self that the past produced. It is already you, completely, right now. In this moment, the inhabiting of it is not the work of becoming. It is the work of recognizing what you already are and allowing what you already are to be fully present in the life you are actually living. That recognition is available today. That allowing is available today. The version of you that the arrival made possible did not wait for a future date to be real. It became real the moment the time was over. The moment the constraint lifted. The moment the certainty that was being carried without support found the support that the arrival provides. It is real right now. It is here right now. The only work is letting it be what it is in the actual moments of your actual day. Start with the next moment. The very next thing you do after you finish reading this. Do it as the person who has arrived rather than the person who is still on the way. Not performing the arrival. The performance would be the opposite of what is called for. Simply being in it. Being present in the moment as the complete, clarified, fully here person that the time being over has revealed you to be. That is the whole instruction. Do it in the next moment and the moment after that and the moment after that. The rest follows from those moments with the inevitability of what is real expressing itself when nothing is preventing the expression.